Scrolling Reddit and seeing them talk about football reminds me a lot of going to the zoo. You go in, watch the animals do something crazy, then leave. Sometimes you see something so silly that you just have to talk to somebody sane about it though. And you can't climb into the monkey enclosure and have a nice civil conversation with them. Think of it as the closest format I can think of to starting a talk radio show in the year 2025, only I get to choose my insane callers. Today's topic isn't the most absurd that I've seen, but it does highlight one of my most hated discussion topics when it comes to football, comparing players across generations. Mr. Blank Name says, I know Van Dijk was up against Richarlison until... First of all, that's a hell of a disclaimer, because Richarlison looked horrendously off the pace last week, but Van Dijk is comfortably the best CB I have ever seen. Nostalgia merchants will point to the CBs of yesteryear, but put aside trophies, which is depending on the team game and the side and era you play for, in terms of pure talent, there is no weakness in his game. I'm going to start out by saying, if you have Van Dijk in the conversation for being the best Premier League defender of all time, I take no issue with that. I think you can easily make the case for him being number one. What I take umbrage with in this statement is the confident comparison of players across generations, to the point of being able to say that he is comfortably the best CB they've ever seen. Number 1. The standards of strikers faced. I have some more philosophically based opinions coming up, but this one is all football, baby. The best strikers that Van Dijk has played against at Liverpool in the Premier League, in order, is Harry Kane, Sergio Aguero, and Erling Haaland. And the standard drops off sharply after that. Number 4 would arguably be Jamie Vardy or Ollie Watkins, for example. You could be generous and throw in a season of Eden Hazard or argue that Son's a striker, but I don't think that works for this conversation. For me, the other centre-backs in this debate are John Terry, Rio Ferdinand and Vincent Kompany. You could probably throw Vidic, Stam or one of the Arsenal centre-backs in there depending on your preferences, but that's my personal list. The strikers that those centre-backs would have faced included Thierry Henry, Wayne Rooney, Didier Drogba, Van Nistelrooy, Torres, Van Persie, Michael Owen, Tevez, Prime Aguero. You have Defoe, Diego Costa, late Alan Shearer, Nicholas Anelka, Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank. I genuinely think I could go on for 10 or 20 more strikers until I'm down at the quality of the Van Dijk list. The way teams attack has changed a lot in 20 years, but relatively speaking, the standard of striking faced has gone way down. Number 2 is the unknown quantities. First of all, do we imagine Van Dijk travelling back in time? If so, how does he handle more two-striker formations and the increased attacking talent in the league? Or are we bringing Ferdinand and Terry both forward in time and asking them to play with and against the high press? Terry and Ferdinand were both known as good ball players in their time. Terry was left-footed and had a very good passing range, two things which would serve him well, and Ferdinand in particular was known as a player who was well ahead of his time in terms of his on-the-ball skills, combined with great athleticism. But we have no idea how they'd adapt to today. Terry, who played pretty far past his prime for Chelsea, had left before Van Dijk had even made an appearance. And the game's changed drastically since even then, never mind the mid-2000s. You can't just go back and watch 20 games of them all and judge who was the best defender based off the tape, as they were asked to do drastically different things, while standards were drastically different, and while facing drastically different threats as defenders. I really do think this is one of the most boring and pointless topics of conversation. That might seem a bit rich after waffling on about it for 10 minutes or however long this has been, but I really do think it's true, and I'm going to try and convince you why. You can basically compare across eras in two ways. The stupidest way is to try and compare them in a more objective fashion. So just if we had a time machine and we put 2025 Van Dijk and 1994 Maldini on the same pitch, who'd have a better game? This for me is quite possibly the most pointless discussion of all time, if this is what you want to do. I'm pretty sure you could take Beto back from Everton Take him to the 1970s and he'd score 9 goals in the World Cup final and lead Guinea-Bissau to glory if he had the chance. I think it's hard for us to comprehend just how much footballers have improved, even over the time span of our fairly tame example of Rio Ferdinand's prime to Virgil Van Dijk's prime. It's a series of small improvements and advancements in tactics, sports science, professionalism, etc., which may seem small, but which add up into an enormous progression over time. The other way to do it is to pretend that instead of being born in 1991, we can pretend Virgil van Dijk was born in 1980 and go from there. But this introduces so many insane unknowns that it's ridiculous. How does he deal with a different academy setup and developmental processes that were in place in the past? Does the physical game take more of a toll and an early injury knock off some of his longevity or some of his pace? Does the lack of professionalism and different societal attitudes lead to him picking up smoking and enjoying it a bit too much? Or maybe John Terry grows up addicted to Counter-Strike or Fortnite if he was born 10 or 15 years later. The thing is, we can literally never know. In my opinion, the only semi-valid way to compare players is to compare them within their own era, sorting them into brackets and then using those categorizations to compare and contrast across eras. And I love doing that. Players are so much more easily compared. You'll have most of the relevant context to discuss the player. They're playing in similar systems against similar teams, and there's still so much room for interpretation, different opinions, having a discussion with your mates about who was best. It just takes the level of guesswork involved in the conversation from a 9 down to like a 5 or a 4 instead. So I don't mind you saying, for example, that Harry Kane was better than Mikel Forsell. He was. Harry Kane was one of the best strikers in the world, having maybe 2 or 3 players being better than him at any one time. And Mikel Forsell was a good Premier League standard striker with probably hundreds of better strikers than him in the world at any one point. But when you get down to separating players who are in those same brackets, so players like Ferdinand, Terry, Kompany or Van Dijk, you'd have them all categorized as world-class, very, very good players in their time. I don't think you can ever definitively separate them conclusively. And you absolutely better not roll up and start using words like comfortably in the same sentence as that. You'd have to be on levels like Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo to even start thinking about doing it. The thing that annoys me most, I guess, is that this is such an easy thing to fix. I only need to make one change and it's a great topic of conversation again. It's change this from a fact to an opinion. Just say, my favourite player. He's easily my favourite. And now it's a great and it's a fun conversation again. Instead of a nearly impossible contest that can never be won, we're reminiscing. The boys are in the group chat naming obscure 2000s footballers and they're losing their minds, going crazy, having the absolute time of their lives. Everything is good and you remember what it feels like to be young. To sum it up, I hate people stating opinions as facts for no reason, and I hate repetitive, circular, worn-out debates that are rife with bias. Van Dijk is a great defender, and as much as I have enjoyed watching him in the past, Richarlison may just be washed.